From the pages of MikeHuckabee.com, where you can read all my columns and sign up for my always free Huckabee newsletter. You can have them delivered right to your email inbox twice every day. Let's take another look back at the week that was. Well, the word debate was used very loosely this week as President Trump, Joe Biden, and arguably Chris Wallace faced off in the first of three get-togethers before Election Day. Of course, a debate is supposed to be an exchange of ideas, laying out policy proposals, and making your case to the American people that you've got what it takes to lead them for at least another 4 years. But what actually happened was a hot mess inside a dumpster fire inside a train wreck, as Jake Tapper of CNN put it. That might be the only point of agreement I have with a CNN anchor in recent memory. Well, I put together a list of my favorite debate highlights, which you can read in full right now over at MikeHuckabee.com. And just a note to Chris Wallace, who moderated the debate, Chris mischaracterized something called critical race theory as racial sensitivity training. But let's be clear about what it actually is. It's almost the opposite of racial sensitivity. Critical race theory is born out of a Marxist movement to use race to sow division and resentment. It is fundamentally racist in itself because it singles out white people for public shaming, making them admit to being evil racists, even if they're not. Now, almost 50 years after Dr. Martin Luther King's vision of a colorblind society, critical race theory actively promotes racism by insisting that people be judged not by their character, but by the color of their skin. President Trump recently signed an executive order banning critical race theory-based training in the federal government, ironically doing more to end the scourge of racism in America than any of the leftist blowhards who have accused him of racism. Now let's turn to the Twitterverse. That's where you can follow me at GovMikeHuckabee. And of course, the first debate between the candidates dominated the news cycle after news cycle after news cycle and every social media feed. That is until President Trump tested positive for coronavirus on Friday. But looking back at the debate, I think the only real winner was the maker of Excedrin. I concluded, let's do the next debate as a Zoom call. That way Joe can stay in the basement, President Trump can beam in from the Oval Office, and the moderator can call from their office at the DNC. Frankly, they may have to now. Here's to hoping the next moderator asks Joe about what exactly an exalted cyclops is. What is that, you wonder? Well, earlier this week, National Press Secretary for the Trump campaign, Hogan Gidley, pointed out to CNN's John Berman that Joe Biden had spoken at the funeral for one of these exalted cyclopses and praised him profusely. Now, if you don't know what that is either, a Google search reveals it's a leader of the KKK. Robert Byrd, longtime senator and mentor to Joe Biden, was an exalted cyclops. I want to thank Hogan for pointing out the hypocrisy and the total bias of the press for not pressing Joe Biden on that interesting point of fact. By the way, full disclosure, Hogan Gidley worked for me in the governor's office in Arkansas, as well as in most all of my campaigns for both governor and president. Now that brings us to a few very well-deserved shame on yous. First, to the White House press corps, who harassed Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany on President Trump's condemnation of white supremacist groups. See, they say he hasn't done that, at least not forcefully enough. But of course, President Trump has repeatedly condemned white supremacy, and Kayleigh read off at least 4 instances in the last couple of years where he did just that, including at last week's debate. But for some reason, it is just not sinking in. How many times do they need to hear it? Kayleigh, the next time they decide to harass you over this, let's go to the videotape, as a famous sports anchor used to say. And I say, Kayleigh, roll the tape.
I totally disavow the Ku Klux Klan. I totally disavow David Duke.
When you say the party is self-destructing, what do you see as the biggest problem with the Reform Party right now?
Well, you've got David Duke just joined, a bigot, a racist, a problem. I mean, this is not exactly the people you want in your party.
So are you prepared right now to make a clear and unequivocal statement renouncing the support of all white supremacists?
Of course I am. Of course I am. How many times do I have to reject? I've rejected David Duke. I've rejected the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. About the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally.
Next in the barrel, we got Joe Biden. You didn't think you'd escape a shame on you, did you? Well, no. This week, Joe said that Antifa was just an idea. Not a group, just an idea. President Trump pointed out ideas don't assault cops. They don't burn down buildings. And of course, he's right. And I might add that ideas don't cause $2 billion worth of property destruction, which is what insurance companies estimate the extremist groups, including Antifa, have caused. And that's just over the last few months. Joe, maybe you ought to be less concerned about what a group of people is and more concerned about what a group of people do. All right, let's leave off with some well-deserved shout-outs. First, to crews working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the U.S.-Mexico border wall. The Washington Post reports that President Trump's $15 billion border wall is growing 10 miles per week. And the White House says, setting the administration up to complete its year-end goal with time to spare. In other words, promises made, promises kept. Under budget, ahead of schedule. And this is a government project. Usually on time is light years ahead of schedule. Finally, this will surprise you. A shout out to Whoopi Goldberg, co-host of The View, who broke one of her rules and said a word she'd refused to say for more than 3 years. The word is Trump. That's right, as in President Trump. Whoopi has referred to him as our leader or the guy in charge since the president has taken office, refusing to acknowledge who that guy actually is out of her disdain for the president. Now, whether she broke her rule by accident or on purpose, Whoopi deserves some credit, at least, for acknowledging reality. Because whether she likes it or not, that guy in charge is a fellow named Trump. Well, with fall here and soup season upon us, I'd like to leave you with this wonderful thought from the esteemed philosopher Ludwig von Beethoven, who said, "Only the pure in heart can make a good soup." I think a lot of you just learned something about your spouse. And until next time, these have been the facts of the matter. Now, if you're seeing this, I know you've enjoyed that video. I mean, how could you not, after all? So you know what you should do? Leave a like, click on the subscribe button below, and hit the notification bell next to it so you'll always know when I have another video up for you to enjoy.